Welcome back. We're talking today with an old friend of mine from my days in the math department at UNC Wilmington. His name is Father Gregory Plow, and he was a student of mine in the 1990s. He was studying math education, and I had the great good fortune of teaching him some of his math courses and also observing him teach. I will go on record as saying Father Gregory, as he is known now, was one of the best and most memorable students I taught, and he is one of the finest and most committed believers I know. Following graduation, he went on to teach math for a couple of years, but then followed his calling to become a Franciscan friar from the Third Order Regular of St. Francis. His province sponsors 2 universities, and he is director of the Post-Novitiate Formation Program located in Washington, D.C., preparing friars for the permanent brotherhood and priesthood. Welcome to the podcast, Father Gregory.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schatzberger, Paul. It's great to be with you, and you too, Scott.
So, as the name of the podcast indicates, we're interested in talking about moments that matter in your life and how they have directed or redirected you to this point. So let's start with math and teaching math. Where did that love come from?
Well, I was pretty good at math from probably the third or fourth grade on, and enjoyed it, and got involved in, I was in when they started doing tracking back in the day. I was in like the higher level track, and then when I was a senior in high school, I was in a calculus class, and my professor, our teacher, Mr. Tomberg, was going to be absent today, and I'm not sure what happened in the way of substitutes, but he had asked me to teach just the lesson for the one class that I was in, just to get up out of my seat and teach the lesson he had prepared, just for our class, not for the whole day. And I was like, sure. So he just taught me the lesson ahead of time, and I did it, and it went well. It was, I remember even what the lesson was to this day. It was so long ago. It was the slow way of doing derivatives, not the shortcut way. And it was so fascinating. So anyway, and then at that point I realized, wow, I might have a knack for this, because everybody in the class seemed to get it. Now, of course, this is an advanced class, so, you could probably have Bugs Bunny up there teaching, the lesson, but I felt like I accomplished something. So then I decided to, well, maybe I'll look at being a math teacher. And in fact, that was what I had intended to do as I entered as a freshman from when you and I met at University of North Carolina at Wilmington. And from, my experience at UNCW studying secondary math education was excellent. Wonderful professors, including yourself, and then, of course, after I graduated, I did teach for a couple years in high school, as I had wanted, until I finally followed, God's nagging at me in what ended up becoming my vocation as a Franciscan friar and priest.
Well, I can tell our audience I really enjoyed teaching you in some of your math courses, and especially math history, because I knew you really got the whole connection between math and faith. When we talked about the giants of mathematics who were also believers. And I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole and for fear of losing our audience, but can you talk about your impressions of the connection between faith and math specifically, and academics in general?
Yeah, sure. One way I might sum it up real quick is to start is just, I did also get a statistics minor at UNCW and an art history minor, 2 very closely related fields, by the way.
I did not know that.
Yes, there's a lot of cross references between those 2 disciplines. And when I was in art history, I discovered some things philosophically that were portrayed in art, in Renaissance art, that in which you had Aristotle recommended that all his students of philosophy, or anyone who would study philosophy for that matter, study mathematics first. And part of that is because, and we have to study philosophy first before we study theology to be priests. And part of the reason for mathematics preceding philosophy is just because of the discipline and the way that mathematics works for the mind. But I think that there's much more to this elevating way in which math can lead to philosophy, of course, which can lead to theology, as St. Thomas Aquinas would say. And that is that, in math, it's a very calculated discipline, and it's very exacting. The whole goal most of the time in mathematics is to find an answer. And, we came across this class. Is this a good time to talk about the axiomatic systems class?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Does that help answer the next question? Okay. So I did take this one class with Dr. Smith, axiomatic systems, which is basically, for our listeners, just a course that has advanced level proofs. And one of the things that we learned was that there are some things in mathematics we know to be true, but we can never actually do the empirical proof that they are true, which seems so counterintuitive, especially to a mathematician. Another similar type of mind-blowing experience in this course was that there is a way to prove that there are different sizes of infinity, which again, to the average listener is hard to comprehend. It's even hard really for mathematicians to comprehend, but there is a simple proof to actually show that. And these things, kind of transcend the boundaries of mathematics being this confined, logical, analytical system that ends with a conclusion, and then we can wipe our hands at the end of the day. It shows that there's this greater knowledge, there's this greater information that exists out there that's beyond human capacity to really know or understand. And when I first was learning this, I had developed this God of the gaps kind of philosophy, if you will, which is not according to Christian doctrine, but it was a way in which I could come to say, okay, we can know all these things, and then these little things we don't understand, God's present there. Of course, we believe as Christians that God transcends everything, all the things we know and don't know. But these little things that's crept in of being just beyond ourselves pointed the way to a higher being, somebody beyond it all. And that's where I started to really try and wed the these concepts of faith and reason. At the same time, this is the last point I'll say on this, is at the same time Pope John Paul II came out in 1996, I believe it was, with a document, the highest level of teaching that a pope can come out with, called an encyclical. And the name of this document is very long. It is called Fides et Ratio, the Latin phrase for faith and reason. And so it's a great read for anybody, even if you're not Catholic, especially for Christian scientists, just to see how faith and reason are not contradictory to each other, and that they go hand in hand and can be intertwined. And so that document really helped me contextualize a lot of what I was experiencing in my growth in the faith and my growth in the discipline of mathematics and studies.
That's so awesome. Now I have to say to our audience a little bit of a sidebar here. I knew Greg as a student, but I knew him in other, venues as well. We had a faculty group that used to get together at UNC Wilmington almost every lunchtime and played hearts. And this was one of my cherished experiences from my time at UNC Wilmington. But it was very unusual that Greg was one of the only, if not the only, student who played with us. And I think that speaks very highly of, the esteem of the faculty. One of the fondest memories I have of you, Greg, is that, Father Gregory, is that right before your graduation, you gave us some laminated playing cards that you thought kind of represented our character and our impact on you. And you should know that I still have those cards, and they are a precious possession of mine. And in fact, I have them with me.
Don't show them to me. Don't show them yet. I was thinking about which cards I gave you, because I remember I specially chose. And did I give you the ace and the jack?
You gave me an ace.
Okay. The ace kicker. I knew that. Okay. What was the other one I gave you there?
Well, you gave me the ace of hearts because you said it represented me being the ace of the math department.
Yes, that's true.
But then you gave me the two also, the two of hearts. So you say, I thought I'd give you a break.
That's right.
And I should explain to and here it is, Greg.
My gosh, I can't believe it.
You should be impressed, by the way, that I knew which box this was in. But anyway, I should tell the audience that in the game of hearts, if you don't know, the whole point is to not take points. And so if you have a 2, you get to duck other cards that potentially could give you points. So, and then you say, thank you for everything. Sincerely, Greg Plow, 99. Okay. So I was wondering if you have any fond memories of playing with that group of faculty.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do very much. And I not a long period of time goes by when I won't recollect that experience. That was a great blessing for me. I think it goes to show that not all mathematicians are nerds, and we know how to have fun too a little bit.
Absolutely.
And we would just joke around with each other, and it was just, I felt really included. I think it shows, and I think it shows you and the other math department professors' ability to really engage and and encounter the students. I think there might be some faculty that would go into the faculty dining rooms and not allow students in, but you all allowed me in, and really it was a great blessing for me, for sure. And I kind of wonder how some of those professors are doing. Maybe after we finish recording, I'd like to catch up in here. But yes, it was a great, thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
And some days, I will also say we got up to, I think, maybe 10, 11, 12 players. It was insane to play hearts with that many people, sometimes with 2 decks. But anyway, well, once graduation passed.
Let me just say this real quick too, Paul. No. Hearts is something, because of having played with you all, hearts is something I brought into the Franciscans.
Nice.
And I've taught some of the friars to play. Now, they don't play with me too often because of how competitive I am, but they when they do play, I tell them always about our time together, my time playing with the math professors, and then when they beat me, they really earn it. They brag about it for a while.
It's like when I would beat Dr. Smith.
That's right.
I would talk about that for days. So once graduation passed and you began teaching, I will admit to you my surprise at your transition from teaching to studying for the priesthood. Can you tell us a little bit about your faith journey and how you knew you should pursue becoming a Franciscan friar?
Sure. So I would like to share with you that by starting back in college a little bit. I actually started in high school. I went on a high school retreat. I was born and raised Catholic, okay? And I grew up in North Carolina. I did go to Catholic youth group, but most of my friends were not Catholic, Christians, Protestants of different denominations and non-denominational. Of course, going to UNCW, same thing. I was in these 2 ecumenical Christian groups, which I really enjoyed very much, in addition to going to the Catholic Newman Center. And when I was in high school, I went on a retreat in which I really encountered God in a very personal way. I encountered the love of God that was, overwhelming and a very powerful experience. And so at that point, it wasn't just I believe in God or this is what I was raised with. At this point, it was, I'm walking with God. I'm following him. I'm loving him. It's a relationship. He's a person of Jesus Christ. And then, when I got to college, I will have to admit, this isn't confession here, but I will have to admit that I did going to a big public state school. I did stray from the belief and the practice of my faith for at least the first year. It may have been the first 3 semesters. I made a lot of bad choices, and I also subscribed, unfortunately, to some of the like kind of more moral relativistic things that can be taught in a lot of state school philosophy classes, and I even was put on academic probation that first year. I didn't tell you that. I don't think you did.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that one either.
Yeah, I had 1 semester to pull it up, and I did. And actually, I pulled it out too. You pulled out your cards. I found an old piece of paper, which is a graph of my climbing GPA. I'd set goals for myself. And I ended up graduating with, I think, like a 3.2 or something, which being on academic probation after 1 year is pretty good. So I kind of got my stuff together after that first year. And at the same time, I had met a really good friend of mine named David Myers, who is a collegiate swimmer, Southern Baptist. And, Baptist. He wasn't Southern Baptist. And he and I just formed a friendship, and we started sharing our faith together, and then growing that way in fellowship. And then I had other Christian friends in those ecumenical groups I mentioned to you, and then you, Dr. Paul, just the faith that you modeled for me as a man who's as a Christian yourself, and then also as someone who has some gray matter up in here in his head, And said, wow, this faith, this can work. You can be smart and you can believe in God. I think the world a lot of times wants to tell us that faith is for the weak.
Sure.
And stuff. So at least that's something I've kind of bought into. And so all these things these are all the moments the moments that matter, right? The poor GPA and I have to get my act together. Meeting Dave Myers and starting friendship with him, with you, Paul, starting a relationship with you that was very mentoring, if you will. These were all moments that mattered in my college career. I started dating a very good Catholic girl, and that was a moment that mattered as well, to see how a good relationship it can be based, a dating relationship, romantic relationship can be based in the Lord. And then, as I was dating her more and more, I started, thinking about maybe I will marry her someday. That's sort of the natural progression when you date someone for a couple of years, right? And so I said, that's a long time to be married to someone. And for the rest of your life, and so that's what we promise, right, when people get married. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, if I'm going to do something for the rest of my life, like I don't know if you remember, but I prayed about whether I should take a job at one school or another, and I came to you for advice. Yeah. And you're like, let's pray about it, and I prayed about it, and I chose one or the other with the direction of God. And then I said, well, if I'm going to do something more permanent, I need to pray to God on this one, So I said, so I prayed about it. And of course, you're discerning a lifelong vocation at that point. And so as the mathematician that I was, you'll appreciate this. When you have a problem to solve, you look at all the different things that the variables can be, right? And then you sort it out, defining the different variables. And so that's what I did. I looked at married life. I looked at single life. We have the priesthood in the Catholic Church. You can be a permanent deacon and married. and all these different things. Religious life, which is a brother instead of a priest. So all these different options. And I started researching them and praying about them and seeking counsel from wise people, as the scripture says to do. And it was, that was filled with moments that matter. That 4-year discernment process from after my junior year, the summer of 1997, until I entered in 2001, after I had taught then for 2 years. So that's kind of how I came into that. It was, I think the 2 years of teaching, I did not leave teaching. For all of you teachers out there who might be listening to this, I did not leave teaching because I was burned out or I didn't like it. Teaching's a great profession, and I loved it, but God was calling me to this. And actually, as God would have it, I feel like I'm a lifelong educator. My uncle says I have more degrees than a thermometer, and I just do now, even in this role here, with being a formator for these young men, teaching them, and I feel like I'm a lifelong student as well. So you never really, even though I gave up my formal teaching job there, as a Christian, there's we are in continuous conversion. We may have one moment of conversion, one big moment that matters when we accept Jesus Christ, right? But then the rest of our life is filled with continuous conversion, in which we have to continue to seek him in everything.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Well, you talked about moments that led you to becoming a Franciscan friar. Pick up there. What has happened since that journey began? Did you say 2001?
Yes.
What, I guess, for those who are listening and unfamiliar with the process of becoming a Franciscan friar, what did that look like, and what's that journey been like since then?
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit of background. Most of the time when people think of Catholic priests, they might think of the man who wears the clerical suit, the black suit with the white tab collar, like a lot of other denominations clergy will wear. And those in the Catholic Church, those are diocesan priests, and they're usually geographically bound in their diocese and don't ever leave. They might be transferred from one church to another by their bishop, who is their immediate boss. And they don't choose their bishop. The bishop is chosen for them by the Pope. Then in the Catholic Church, we also have these religious orders for congregations. And these are groups of men or women. There are no co-ed ones. Men or women who live in monasteries or friaries or convents together in common. And they do, like the priests, like myself, do a lot of the same work in ministry that a diocesan priest will do. I'll celebrate Mass. I will hear confessions. I'll baptize. I'll preach, do funerals, and all the marriages, all those things. But we profess additional vows of poverty, chastity, obedience to God. Instead of making those kinds of promises to a bishop, we profess them to God, which is and we live in common. And then so there are many of the different groups around the world. Of course, you're talking, the Benedictines. I'm a Franciscan. There's Dominicans, Jesuits. Pope Francis is a Jesuit, so he's a religious, technically. He was not a diocesan priest. And so I was discerning. So going back to that mathematical kind of systematic method of discerning. And let me be clear too. My method of discerning included prayer. Okay, it included listening to the Lord. If only it were so easy as solving a math problem. I mean, I think, boy, it wouldn't have taken me 4 years. But in doing that, I looked at the diocesan priesthood and I looked at the religious life, and I realized that God was in fact calling me to be in religious life in a community. And then from there, it was a matter of where. And then I found my home where God was calling me to be a Franciscan. And then, of course, there are many Franciscan groups around the world, and I had to pick one. and I found my home with this particular one precisely because, in short, our major charism is continuous conversion that I spoke of earlier, which really is at my heart.
Thanks for listening to Moments That Matter, a podcast that looks at the moments in our lives that come along from time to time that have consequences long after the moment, especially those moments that have to do with the choice of vocation. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation, Parker Palmer speaks of a clearness committee in the Quaker tradition, wherein a group of older, wiser people ask questions of someone considering a life choice as a way of clarifying the next step. We may not meet with a committee about these big decisions, but we all have these critical junctures in our lives, which we can think of as clearness committee moments. We need to pay attention to these moments because they are profound and potentially life-altering. We'll relay stories from our lives and interview others about theirs, especially noting the clearness committee moments, those we choose to recognize and those that were sadly ignored, those decisions that were made with God in mind and those that were not. Our hope is that these podcasts will cause you to think of the same kind of moments in your life with new clarity.